Go ahead and call to order the regularly scheduled meeting of Tuesday, April 11th, 2023. Please join me for a flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The Assembly of the City and Borough of Sitka would like to respectfully acknowledge the traditional first people of Sitka. With gratitude, we proceed on Tlingit Ani. Sarah, roll call, please.
Mayor Eisenbeis.
Present.
Mr. Mosier.
Here.
Ms. Duncan. Here. Mr. Yestad. He is absent this evening. Mr. Christensen.
Here.
Mr. Pike.
Here.
And Ms. Carlson.
Here.
Thank you. Any correspondence or agenda changes this evening? No ceremonial matters. That'll bring us to special reports. Is there anyone here this evening for government to government? Municipal boards, commissions, committees? Municipal departments? Chief, I understand you may have a report for us this evening. Welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Assembly persons. Thank you for allowing me a few minutes to brief you all on a report. Basically, I wanted to update and let you all know. At the end of March, I sent out a letter to taxi drivers and operators with the intent, basically, the tourism's coming up, this season's coming up, and to clarify some pre-existing ordinances that that operators operate under. And I know there's been some confusion on that from operators and drivers, so I wanted to take the time to brief the assembly and also crafted a response letter to hopefully help the operators understand the rules and the intent a little bit better. So Sitka General Code, Chapter 1156, entitled Taxi Cabs, governs the licensing of taxi cab operators that permit in the permitting of taxi cab drivers and the operation of taxi cabs within the municipality. A taxi cab is defined in Sitka Code 1156.010 Echo as a motor vehicle used for the transportation of passengers for hire within a municipality where the destination and route are controlled by the passengers. The taxi cab operator is defined in 1156.10 G as a person, whether an individual or entity, engaged in the business of providing taxi services. A taxi cab driver is defined as in Sitka Code 1156.10 F as a person who carries on the vocation of driving a taxi cab. And under 1156.20, a taxi cab operator must obtain an operator's license from the municipality to operate the taxi cab services within a municipality. That's basically the business side of the operations. Under Sitka Code 1156.100, a taxi cab driver must obtain a driver's permit for the municipality to drive a taxi cab within a municipality. General Code 1156.70 requires a taxi cab operator to obtain and maintain general liability insurance for its taxi cabs to be operated or driven within under the operator's license. The most significant part of that is under subsection D, where I would emphasize the licensed operator may not sublet or permit satellite business operations to extend from his license. This is significant because operating a tour business from the same motor vehicle used as a taxi cab amounts to a satellite business. Operating extending from the operator's license, other sections of this taxi cab code support this interpretation. Under 1156.140, a taxi cab operator driver must post the taxi cab driver's permit in the taxi cab. Also under 1156.220, A taxi cab operator driver must post the police chief approved taxi cab rates in the taxi cab. In addition, under 1156-260, all taxi cabs used in operators licensed taxi cab business must be designated by an insignia or logo sufficient to identify the operator's taxi cabs to the public. Tours are not similarly regulated. A tour operator / driver is not beholden to the passenger controlling the destination and route within the municipality. A tour / driver isn't required to obtain a license or permit to post the operator driver, excuse me. A tour operator isn't required to obtain a license permit or post the same in the tour vehicle. A tour operator driver isn't required to post tour rates. In fact, a tour operator driver isn't required to follow the police chief approved rate schedule. Tour drivers may establish their own rates. Herein lies a significant problem. If license permitted vehicles such as taxi cab operators and drivers are allowed to run both taxi cab and tour operators out of the same motor vehicles used and designated in compliance with the taxi cab code, there's a significant likelihood of confusion to prospective passengers and or abuse by operators drivers using the same motor vehicles for taxi cabs and tours. Prospective taxi cab passengers could call or hail a motor vehicle that is designated as taxi cab and then are only offered a tour by the operator driver at a rate that is set by the operator driver that exceeds the established taxi cab rates. Basically a bait and switch, so to speak. And this is the problem that have been trying to avoid. I'd like to point out that the municipal attorney, the municipal administrator, myself, have been working on revamping the code that regulates taxi cabs, tour services, chauffeurs, limousines, and other dispatch services. Until then, we must work within the existing code. The city and borough of Sitka is not requiring taxi cab operator drivers and license permittees to obtain separate motor vehicles to conduct tour operations. Rather, CBS is requiring that the tour businesses not use motor vehicles designated externally and internally as taxi cabs to simultaneously serve as tour vehicles. Compliance is relatively simple. If you're using a motor vehicle designated as a taxi cab for tours, remove and or cover the taxi cab designations before using the motor vehicle for tours. Also, don't advertise, solicit, offer, or label the motor vehicle as a taxi cab when it is being used as a tour. Further, if your motor vehicle is designated as a taxi cab when engaged for services by the prospective passenger, don't offer services at rates that exceed taxi cab rates. Remember, under 115680, it's a violation in operating a satellite vehicle business, and may result in revocation and suspension of license. Like I said, this particular letter was drafted to, I guess, address some of the confusion that I guess some of the operators felt. They were provided with code with the first letter, but there seemed to be enough confusion that I wanted to take the time to readdress it. Also, the one thing I just wanted to point out is, much like I pointed out in the first letter, that these are not new codes, they're not new rules, they're existing codes, and they're just being enforced. So I thank you all for your time and indulgence.
Thank you, Chief. We have heard about this already, and it gives us a little background in case the assembly continues to hear about it. Appreciate your time this evening.
Good evening.
Anyone else this evening for municipal departments? Anyone from the school district? And then students and guests. All right, that'll bring us to persons to be heard. This is public participation for any item off of tonight's agenda, not to exceed 3 minutes for any individual.
Hi, Gary White with the Sick Economic Development Association. Just wanted to invite the assembly and the community to see this State of the Sitka Economy next Thursday, the April 20th. It'll be in the auditorium at 1:30 in the afternoon. So everyone's welcome to come in and learn about where our trends are going and some of our economic drivers. Thank you.
Oh, one more time, turn it back. There we go, red
There we
light.
go. Hi, my name is Tori Hay. I am a member of the community, a mom of 2 young Sitkans, and I am an occupational therapist and family service coordinator with the Early Learning Program. The Early Learning Program is your local agency for birth to 3 services or early intervention under Part C of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. We work to ensure that parents have access to the services they need to support their child's skills and development. Because we work with families, often during those first few months of baby's life, we hear parents' concerns as they are attempting to make the transition back into work after their parental leave is done. We consistently hear concerns about wait lists for childcare. Because families try to be as resourceful as possible, we are asked if we know of any babysitters or any other caretakers that could help. So often families are forced to consider other options, such as not returning to work or working much less than they would prefer. In some cases, families have simply just left town because they can't find accessible and affordable childcare. Our lack of childcare infrastructure impacts Sitka's economy and the population of our schools and neighborhoods. As we know, the lack of accessible, affordable, and quality childcare isn't just a local problem, but according to the 2020 Alaska Early Childhood Coordinating Council Economic Report, rural Alaskans have more difficulty finding care than our urban counterparts. Sitkans have been working diligently to address the childcare shortage in our community. We have formed the Early Childhood Coalition, obtained seed money through the Sitka Health Summit, and local efforts are ongoing to establish clear pathways for childcare staff, credentialing, and retention, with work by local advocates such as Annette Evans. Governor Dunleavy recently denied funding to the state budget to improve childcare worker wages, furthering concerns our minimal childcare resources will be stretched even more. As we think of our local budget and possible cooperative efforts across sectors, I believe we need to see early care through the lens of investment. According to the AECCC, every dollar spent in Alaska on early care and learning generates $1.50 in economic activity. According to the same economic report, employers who operate an early childcare learning center or other benefits, such as dependent care assistance plans, increase employee retention by 42%. Parents are working hard to find their own childcare in this community. Sitkans are working to establish partnerships to strengthen local resources. We are here today to advocate for our whole community and assembly to continue consideration of childcare accessibility as a key piece of our community infrastructure. Families and sustainable growth for Sitka are in the balance.
Good evening. My name is Lisa Hodges. I'm an infant mental health specialist at Center for Community Early Learning Program. I'm also mother of 2 children. I'm here tonight to share the importance of investing in early childhood care. The first 5 years of a child's life are the most critical years of brain development. Scientific studies show that by the time a child is 5 years old, their brain will be 90% of its adult size. The early years of relational interaction are a great predictor of a child's failure or success in later adolescence and adult life. When a child has safe and secure attachment figures from birth and have stimulating care environments, they're more likely to thrive. But on the flip side, when children do not have consistent caregiving relationships or environments, their social emotional development will be impacted, which in turn may present itself as mental health issues in adolescence, juvenile delinquency, substance misuse, or health issues in adulthood. On a positive note, nurturing relationships with parents and other caregivers, such as childcare providers, are a buffer against any effects of early childhood adversity. If Sitka invests in high-quality, inclusive childcare for families and invests in a well-compensated childcare workforce, we will be cultivating a healthy community and a vibrant economy. Firsthand, we need to shift our thinking. We all need to place value in early childcare providers, not as babysitters, but as persons who are directly shaping our young children's brain architecture. Early experiences matter. The more positive relationships a child has with adults and peers, the more resilient they will be in life. Families who have access to childcare will have the concrete support needed to sustain their employment and raise their families to the best of their potential. The Child Care Now Group and Early Childhood Coalition, in partnership with various other sectors in Sitka, are actively working to develop solutions to solve our childcare crisis. As we roll out ideas, we ask of your listening ears and your willingness to partner, support, and contribute. Together, we can tackle this issue and find long-lasting solutions that will benefit us all. Young toddlers and infants do not have the voice to speak here tonight, but I will be their voice and say thank you for understanding that children matter and are the future of our community's health and wellness. And thank you for investing during the most critical period of my life. As I close tonight, I reflect on how grateful I am being born and raised in Sitka to have a voice in this place I call home. I'm invested in the community and I hope to make this the best place on earth for my children and others to raise a family.
Hello, members of the Assembly, Mr. Mayor. For the record, my name is Lauren Wilde. I would like to echo what Tori and Lisa just said. The need for affordable early childhood education in Sitka is critical and must be addressed. Our economy is suffering because of it. Lack of options is driving parents and teachers out of the workforce. The impact on our economy is measurable. The U.S. Chamber Foundation estimates that Alaska loses $165 million of revenue every year because of inadequate childcare services. In a recent state survey, 40% of Alaskans reported that someone in their household left or declined to take a job in the past year because of childcare challenges. That hurts business owners and their employees, as well as consumers, and it hurts residents when government employers can't attract a robust workforce and provide public safety or other critical services we all need. It also costs families real income, as families who can access childcare earn up to $41,000 more annually. As Lisa said, the most brain development a person ever has happens between the ages of birth and 6. Education is part of our city's charter, and early childhood education is commonly provided through childcare. So childcare is education. Everything our kids do when they're in a childcare facility or in a preschool is education. They're learning to walk, to talk, how to share, how to process emotions, fine and gross motor skills, how to communicate. Childcare and early childhood education boosts brain development, reduces negative childhood experiences, and leads to success in school and adult life. Investing in kids now and early makes financial sense because we'll spend less on remedial education and the justice system later. Right now, we have a lack of workforce in this sector. People aren't applying for jobs for a few reasons. One, early childhood education and childcare is not really thought of as a career path in our society like K through 12. And even if you wanted the career, then you'd find it's hard to make a competitive wage. Some action that's happening locally, the Sitka Counseling and Prevention Center is working on an application to get some funding through Thread Alaska for a community innovation grant. That I understand the city administrator will be writing a letter of support for that, so thank you. Another solution we've talked about is starting to promote these professions as career pathways in early childhood education. Maybe we can get our high school and college age students to think of this as a career they can have, just like a career in K through 12. As a group with the Early Childhood Coalition, we have some ideas about promoting existing high school career pathways, similar to say like the CNA programs or occupational endorsements that might help boost interest in this sector. The bottom line, though, is that this needs to happen in tandem with finding ways to invest in the workforce and close that pay gap between what centers and preschools can afford to pay their employees and kind of that competitive wage that they might get. So I'm hopeful we can find a way for the city to direct funds towards the early childhood education sector to help close that gap, working together in the future. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Assembly members. My name is Will Peterson. I'm the board president with the Sitka Community Land Trust. It's been a year and a half since you donated the 1410 and 1414 HPR property, part of the old city shops, to the SCLT. I'd like to take a few minutes to share with you what we've done in the past 18 months. We are making great progress. We have divided up the land into spaces for 7 affordable homes. 3 weeks ago, we broke ground on the first home in this phase 2 of the Sioux Shock community. We are actively fundraising for phase 3. It is our goal to put an apartment building on the west end of the site. We're hopeful for 4 2-bedroom apartments, 2 on the first floor, 2 on the second floor. Phase 1, also 7 homes, has 1 house slot still available. The Sioux Shock community will be 14 homes, a 4-plex apartment building when complete if all goes to plan. As we are probably all aware, prices are increasing. Just accounting for the increase in interest rates in the last 18 months, a monthly mortgage payment for the same home has increased $300 a month. Our builder is great. He has kept his margins slim as to not increase material cost at the rate of the market. Even with this additional support, material costs are increasing. We are seeking additional subsidies from state and federal avenues, as well as national nonprofits, to keep our home ownership prices below $300,000. The community land trust model of permanent affordable homeowners stewardship is one that will serve the long-term needs of Sitkans. But the need is greater than what we can meet with 14 homes and 4 apartments. We encourage a citywide conversation about affordable home ownership in Sitka. The SCLT staff and board members invite you next month to the Sioux Shock Community Neighborhood Dedication and Sign Unveiling. Join us at 11 o'clock in the morning on May 13th, 2023, the second Saturday of May. We will also have our nearly complete 6th home and the start of our 7th available to tour. For more information, please visit our Facebook page and website at sitkaclt.org. Thank you. Ganesh Chish.
Mr. Mayor, Assembly members. I'm Mike Finn, president of the Sitka All Train Riders, a nonprofit here in Sitka. I said I'd come back in about a year to talk about some changes if we needed any, or see what things we could accomplish. Tonight I have 5 requests for changes to the city ordinance. Plus I'm asking for 2 assembly members to help get this done as it's required under city code. I think we have a pretty good driving record in town so far. Chief Beatty, where's he going? All right, well, I haven't heard of anybody getting tickets or pulled over. First one is I'd like to have from October 1st to April 1st, anyone plowing snow would only be required to have liability insurance. We used to have 0 restrictions, and a lot of plowers can't afford the higher cost to get on the road. It is quite expensive. I've paid about $500 with the state fees and all that. Also, number 2, remove the trailer restrictions for both UTV and ATVs. If equipped and permitted by manufacturer, these are already tested and safe for towing. My UTV can tow 2,500 pounds, which is one of the reasons I ordered it with the bigger engine. And I can tow more than most small SUVs like the Chevy Equinox and the GMC Terrain. They're only 1,500 pounds. We need to use these for cleanup, moving stuff around. And there's also folks that want to use these for businesses, and they need a trailer for that. The Harbor Mountain cleanup is coming up soon, and we want to be part of that. And we need to have trailers to do that. 3, remove restrictions for ATVs to allow for 2-seaters. There's a lot of ATVs right now that have a second seat, and they're tested and balanced by manufacturer code to handle 2 people. And for the extra weight and the stability. The ATV we are raffling off this year does have the option to have a second seat, but we didn't order it because we weren't sure if that was going to be allowed. But you have tandem bicycles, motorcycles, mopeds, they all allow 2-seaters. 4 is remove restrictions for the full-time 4-wheel drive. I can drive all day long in my 4x4 mode. So why are we restricting those few ATVs? that are full-time 4x4. They know how to handle them. They do pull a little bit, and I know that was a safety concern. But these are older bikes, and most of these are being used for plowing. And I've lost a few plowers because of this. The fifth one is remove the goggle requirements for ATVs. Goggles are very hard to use when you're plowing snow. They're designed to be fog-free when you have a lot of airflow. And when you're plowing at 5 miles an hour, you have zero airflow, and it's very high humidity, so they fog up on you and they're useless. Riders can wear sunglasses, prescription glasses, or whatever, but requiring goggles is not safe in some situations. Bicycles, again, motorcycles, mopeds, they don't require goggles. And neither does a UTV, the full-size vehicle. If I don't have a windshield on it, I still have to have it. Hope to hear from you in a few weeks.
Thank you, appreciate that.
My name's Wayne Dye. A few meetings ago, I'd heard talk about the state putting in another crosswalk so that the tourists could go across to the Raptor Center. I think this is a bad idea. First of all, it'll cost too much because you'd have to put in curb returns on one side and culvert across the ditch on the other side. There's already 2 crosswalks. You just have to make sure that the tourists use those crosswalks. And you need good signage. They need good direction. So up at the Indian River Road crossing, there should be a sign that says, if you're going to the Raptor Center, cross here. And then at the entrance to the park further down, there needs to be a sign that says crosswalk 70 feet east and an arrow pointing that way. And they should be using that crosswalk instead of trying to just go straight across. And maybe on the bottoms of those signs, you need to put a message that if you cross the road without a crosswalk, you will incur a fine. Also, to deter them going across that, there should be a fence put in the ditch line along Solomon Creek Road. And I think that would be a lot less cost than having DOT put another crosswalk in there. And another crosswalk would just end up jamming up all that traffic that's on Solomon Creek anyway. And later, I think Sicker Trail Works, if they haven't already, they will be approaching you for a plan to put a underpass at the river. And I think that would be the best solution of them all, because pedestrians won't be stopping up traffic and the traffic won't be stopping the pedestrians. You know, they won't be messing with each other. You know, they totally miss each other. And that's all I got.
Good evening. My name is Richard Weem. It's an absolutely gorgeous day. It's the kind of day that makes Sitka so special. And hopefully that beautiful sunshine brought out all these persons to be heard. I mean, someone says that sunlight will make people scatter, but here they have congregated. So it's good to see everybody speak and, in essence, interact with the assembly. One important thing to note is that we live on an island and we are fully and completely responsible and dependent upon fossil fuels for all our goods and services. And I'm sure that people have heard most recently that Saudi Arabia, along with 8 other oil-producing countries, are going to cut back on oil production for over 1 million barrels a day. My question whenever I see these things is, how is this going to affect Sitka? Within the persons to be heard, I certainly agree with everyone who spoke for childcare. We have, in quotes, a thriving healthcare industry, but the truth is that it's understaffed and unavailable, meaning that getting personnel is very difficult. So I would think that after all the money, for example, that Search has been spending on living quarters and so forth, that they would bring back their child care services. But even more important, they can be the leader of a child care co-op of all businesses, and the Assembly should call a meeting together of all the stakeholders where they can establish funding through donation, because getting individuals to come to Sitka, some of them will definitely require childcare. And the foundation for childcare shouldn't be expected from outside of town. It's kind of like doing a 10% on a grant. We need to have real skin in the game, and we can. We have enough corporations here who can contribute to this substantially. So let's build a co-op, call the stakeholders together, and start putting in money. When community is involved, maybe other money will come in. And a funny thing is that if you want to know what's going on in the US economy, just look around. I mean, you don't have to look at the newspaper, the internet, anything. Just look at the prices we are dealing with here. The other day, Tanya wanted to go to McDonald's. So, out of the blue, so we went. I hadn't been there in a long time. For a very simple meal for 2 of us was $30. And I was thinking, how could a family of 4 go with that? So it's even worse in the other restaurants. So bon appetit. Thank you.
Anyone else for persons to be heard this evening? Any item off of tonight's agenda? Seeing none, that'll bring us to, we have one telephonic persons to be heard. Sarah, please.
Hi, this is Samantha.
Hi, Samantha. It's Sarah calling from the City and Borough of Sitka Assembly meeting. If you could state your first and last name for the record, and then your 3 minutes of testimony will begin.
Great, thank you. My name is Samantha Matthews, and I'm with the Party Ran Graduate School. I, along with 3 other graduate students, worked with the Sitka Sound Science Center last summer to conduct a community assessment on perceptions of increased tourism and the potential impacts of increased tourism on well-being. And I'm here just to briefly report our project findings. We received 439 responses to the survey, and 11 interviews were conducted with community leaders in nonprofit, government, and business sectors. We found that 87% of respondents reported being impacted by increased tourism during last summer, whether positively or negatively. We asked respondents if increased tourism made Sitka a more or less desirable place to live, and 63% reported less desirable. We asked respondents to write in general impacts of increased tourism, and respondents most often wrote about traffic, transportation, and infrastructure, followed by the economy, the environment and pollution, namely bus pollution, and pedestrian congestion and pedestrian safety, namely jaywalking. The survey also focused on key areas that had the potential to be impacted by increased tourism, based on conversations we had with community leaders last spring. And when we asked about these key areas, respondents perceived the following to be most impacted. One was housing availability and cost. Second was access to recreational and cultural sites. And third was access to local businesses. And throughout these 3 areas, we found a lot of common short-term impacts around congestion and overcrowding, but at the same time, longer-term impacts on housing supply, strains on the environment, and the effects on types of businesses that survive in Sitka. In the report we've released, there are suggestions from respondents as to how to address concerns. Determining the feasibility of these suggestions was out of scope for the project, and we're not endorsing any specific suggestion. Our goal was to bring forth all of the suggestions that we heard, so these ideas can hopefully be useful to the community in future planning. We've now shared the project findings with various organizations in Sitka on Raven Radio and to the Planning Commission a few weeks ago. We know there are various efforts underway to develop priorities and plans for the future, so we hope that these research findings are useful and complementary to those efforts, and that these resident perspectives and voices are considered in the planning process moving forward. Please feel free to contact me or Lisa Bush at the Science Center if you have any questions or would like any additional details. We thank you, anyone who participated and completed the survey. We really appreciate everyone in Sitka and their involvement in this. It wouldn't have been able to be done without them. And thank you for your time tonight. Bye.
And one last call for persons to be heard. Any item off of the agenda? All right, that'll bring us to consent agenda this evening.
I move to approve the consent agenda consisting of item A, approve the minutes of the March 23rd and March 28th assembly meetings.
Second. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any public comment on the consent agenda? Sarah?
Okay, on the motion to approve the minutes, Mayor Eisenbeiß,
Yes.
Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
Mr. Pike,
Yes.
Ms. Duncan,
Yes.
Mr. Mosier,
Yes.
and Ms. Carlson.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
Brings us to unfinished business, item B, please.
I move to approve ordinance 2023-04 on second and final reading, authorizing a property tax exemption for the Sitka Historical Society, Inc. in the leased premises at Harrigan Centennial Hall.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve ordinance 23-04. Is there any public comment?
Good evening. My name is Richard Weem. This has to do with the tax exemption, meaning property tax exemption for the Sitka Historical Society. The good news is in the ordinance, it has the exemption, which will be good until April 30th, 2048. And so I think that turns out to be very wise, because we need to honor those organizations that do serve Sitka in the way that the Sitka Historical Society does. Again, as I mentioned last time this was brought up, I hadn't heard anything about the utilities exemption, and I hope that that exemption will come forward, because it is much more substantial as far as monetary issues are. The difference is between $4,000 approximately for the tax exemption for property tax and $16,000 for utilities. So keep up the good work, and thank you.
Is there any other public comment on ordinance 23-04? Assembly deliberation? Sarah?
Okay, on the motion to approve ordinance 2023-04 on second and final reading, Ms. Duncan,
Yes.
Mayor Eisenbeiß,
Yes.
Mr. Christensen.
Yes.
Mr. Mosier,
Yes.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
and Mr. Pike.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
Brings us to new business first reading, item C, please.
I move to approve ordinance 2023-05 on first reading, amending Title II Administration, Chapter 2.4 Elections of the Sitka General Code by updating Section 2.40.095 Candidate Biographical Information, and repealing and replacing Sections 2.40.190-0 to 230 and 6 absentee or absent advanced balloting.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve ordinance 23-05. Is there any public, Sarah, actually, would you like to introduce this before we go to public comment?
Yes, I would. Thank you. All right, so this ordinance does a couple of things. The first one is in our election code, there's a requirement after a candidate files for elected office that they must submit a photo advocacy statement and bio to me. And there was a concern raised last year that if someone didn't submit that information to me, that their name wouldn't be placed on the ballot. And so my recommendation is, because that's incorrect, my recommendation is that that code language be changed from shall provide to may provide. So that's the first piece of the ordinance. And then the second piece, our office is pretty excited about. We've been working on this one for a little bit. It repeals and replaces our absentee voting section of our code. We've updated with current language. And then we're also adding another form of absentee voting, which is early voting. So currently we have multiple forms of absentee voting. We have by mail, we have by fax, email, in person, we have personal rep. Am I forgetting any, Jess? So we have quite a few. In looking at other codes, I've been watching closely. A few of them about 3 years ago added early voting to their election codes. And most of that was done in 2020 with the pandemic. Prior to the pandemic, absentee in-person voting was held in the foyer on the third floor of City Hall. We had maybe at the most, maybe 1 year close to 500, but generally 200 to 300 people. When the pandemic started, I, just because of COVID mitigation, I decided to move absentee voting over to Harrigan Hall. The first year in 2020, we had about 1,300 people that voted in person prior to election day. And then 2021, 2022, it's been about 700 to 800 people. I think a large piece of that, obviously there was COVID concerns, social distancing and whatnot, but I think the ease of accessibility into Harrigan Hall, I think that plays a big factor into it too. So we have added early voting, and what that is, you're still going to have voting that 15 days prior to the election, which we all know of it as absentee in-person voting right now, but that would be called early voting. So it'll be identical to voting on election day. The voter will walk in, they'll show their ID to the absentee voting official. Their ID will be checked against the register. They'll sign the register, be given a ballot, they go and vote, bring it back, stick it in the ballot box. The nice thing, this is the part we're really excited about, as we've received a lot of feedback from voters. With absentee voting, they have to fill out paperwork, and that can get pretty cumbersome for some. So people, I think, will be really happy about that feature of it. And then also with early voting, you're going to have the results on election night. So the results for that poll for early voting won't be closed out until the precincts, precinct 1 and 2 are closed out on election night. So overall, I'm excited about this. We'll still have, we're not removing any options from code. We're still going to have by mail, by fax. We'll still have absentee in person. Our code right now, if, once I receive the ballots and I check them in, our code allows me to issue a ballot to a voter. So for example, I have several people, probably maybe 20 people each year, they're going to be overseas, or they're going to take a bike trip across the country, and they're not going to have access to email, or they're not going to have access to mail delivery. And so I can allow them by code to come in and vote with us early, prior to what absentee in person is at Harrigan, which would then be early voting now with this new code. So that's what we have.
Great. Thank you for the work on that. It looks pretty extensive. I'm sure the assembly will have a few more questions for you. So is there any public comment on ordinance 23-05?
Good evening, Richard Weem here. I love irony. And so the city requires an advocacy statement, a bio, a photo, and those kind of things when you apply to run. Now, does that seem so hard to do and to comply with? My initial thought when I read this is if you change shall from may, I think that the individual who could not take the 5 minutes or potentially longer to submit these informational items to the clerk to be put on the city website to help inform the citizenry maybe shouldn't run. I understand how difficult it is to remember your life in 150 words. And it's very possible you forgot what you stand for. And I know people can be shy about getting pictures taken, but I think that that on its face is ridiculous and it should be separated from this emotion in order to say it still shall be shall. The other one is I'm just a big fan of one day in-person voting, but at the end of the day, anything that Sarah wants, give it to her because I think she knows better than anybody. So that's that on early voting. Thank you.
Any other public comment on 23-05? Back to the assembly for deliberation. Everybody wants to tackle this one right away.
I was just gonna say,
Kevin?
I thank you. I think this is great job. I think it clarifies things. Good job.
Crystal?
A bunch of questions. The problem that you're trying to address on, we will not post it if received after the deadline. What was the problem being experienced? Were too many people turning it in after the fact and then you had to load it to the website?
Oh, for the bio.
Yeah, because
So I ran into an instance last year where it wasn't submitted. And then there was a question as to whether it could be posted.
Okay.
And code didn't really speak to that. So I just wanted to address that question.
Okay, because I'm just thinking, this is one of the few free promotional items that is accessible to all candidates. And so I also think it's due towards the beginning of the election. And so I did take a little bit of, I knew it came from somewhere and I just wanted to get a greater background on why or what problem we were addressing. So I tend to think that if they choose not to make it available as early as possible, that's on them. Maybe people went to the website early on, but I do think I had issue with that. So I just wanted to share the reasoning behind that is because, again, we know campaigns can be expensive. And so this is that one instance where the city is not taking a stand or a position. They're just making it accessible as they receive it. So if that wasn't a huge problem, I think I would weigh in on that single piece with respect to that revision. And then we made the qualified voter section. So the very first instant, we made that very succinct. So if you go back to the original, it was paragraph after paragraph after paragraph talking about who's eligible. But for folks who are listening, what makes you a qualified voter in a local election?
Well, I can pull up the code here quick.
And then I think you spoke to this one actually, but you had referenced that you're looking to other codes that have been recently revised. Because I noticed that you very much so kind of reformatted, you sort of started anew. You didn't
did.
go through and say, I'm going to it's a brand new document. So I
Yeah.
read through both and I'm guessing, based off of what you said, was that you were looking to other municipalities and you said best practice, here's what I'm seeing. So here's how I'm going to revise the code. So I think you already addressed that one.
I did. I felt that, this new version better explains our
Mhm.
actual process than the previous code.
And it read well to me, so I'm okay with that. I just, I wanted to acknowledge all the work that you put into it. So
Thank you.
there were a lot of changes and I appreciate that. And I appreciate you have the background to actually find best practice, how we should sort of transform this document. So I see that a lot of work was put into it.
I do have the voter qualification piece pulled up. So a person may vote at any municipal election who is at least 18 years of age and has been a resident of the municipality for at least 30 days immediately prior to the election, and is a citizen of the United States and is qualified to vote in state elections.
Awesome, thanks. And then this was sort of just logistics. I was just curious when it came to faxing or electronic. I know that's not super popular, but it says the application to do so must be received on election day by 5 p.m. Am I reading that correctly? But then
You are, because our office closes at 5 p.m. And so I wanted to make sure that that there was a hard deadline on that. I didn't want something to come through
okay,
after that.
because I think I'm confusing the application versus the actual ballot that will be
Oh,
faxed to
sorry.
them. Because I think the application, it says must be received by 5 p.m., I think on election day. But then the ballot itself, I think, has to be received back in your office. I guess I wasn't sure. So maybe I confused that and those are the same things.
Can you
So
tell me
January
what-
1, and I
what-
don't have the line, I'm so
Okay.
sorry, but January 1, you can apply for a faxed or a,
by mail.
Looks like in the 250, 258 range.
line 262 is what I have written down. I guess I did write something down. So around that area.
To be counted in the election, the voted, faxed, or electronically transmitted ballot must be received by the municipal clerk no later than the closing of polls on election day. And then up above, I have beginning on January 1 of each election year, any qualified voter may apply for an absentee ballot to be sent by fax or electronic transmission by the municipal clerk. A complete application must be received by the municipal clerk by 5 p.m. on election day. So they could still apply to get a by fax or by email ballot up until 5 p.m. on election day.
And then they have to get it back to you.
by 8.
So they have
PM.
a couple of hours.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I
Yeah.
wanted to make sure that.
No,
that-
these are good questions. This was a lot in this ordinance, so I appreciate it.
And then just something about if somebody chooses to fax it, I know that it states that they waive confidentiality, so other people are going to have access to it and may see how they vote, but does that go to the municipal clerk's office and you guys are basically the small handful that would have access to that?
That's correct. So typically, if we see a fax or the email, or well, the fax come in, Jess and I, or Holly and I, two of us are going into my office and transferring that ballot onto an official ballot. So one of us will read,
Okay.
but the door is closed. Yes.
Okay. Good to know. I
Yep.
appreciate it. Those
Yep.
are my questions.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Further assembly deliberation? Sarah, I just want to say thank you. I think making voting more accessible to more people is definitely a win. I understand how it can be difficult for some to make it down on a particular day. So your work in modernizing our voting system to the standards that are in place elsewhere is much appreciated. Thank you for that. Crystal?
I think I wanted, so not a Sarah specific question, but I think I wanted to bring up the idea about if you don't receive it by this deadline, we will not post information, your bio, your efficacy statement in the run up to the election. How do we feel like that as a assembly? I shared my thoughts on that. I think whenever they submit it, again, this is the only free promotion that the city provides. And so I think it should be listed there. It didn't seem like a major problem that we were encountering. We just wanted to address that it had been addressed. So I feel like Sarah's not passionate that we won't post it. So I wanted to bring that up as a discussion item.
What would you mean, like, what was your question specifically again?
So they give you a day to submit your materials and then Sarah will post it to the city. I think if you do it after the fact, I'm okay with it getting posted, so long as this isn't something that is really bogging down the clerk's office of having to go update the website. I think if you choose to turn it in 2 weeks prior to, you're going to miss a lot of viewing audience members who probably already went there, but I don't think it should be discluded from the city website.
So you're in favor of not having a deadline at all?
Yeah, I think so. And that one is specifically stated and it's new to this code. So that's the only hiccup I have.
Yeah.
Personally, I like the time limit. I mean, you know, you need to, I like that it's a May. If you don't want to do it, don't do it. And I honestly think that it's a May transmits a certain amount of how seriously you're taking it. If they don't put anything in, they're probably not taking it that seriously. And, you know, I know that Sarah will make sure that they know their deadline is coming up. I can attest to that. So I don't have a problem with the deadline. I mean, you need to have a certain amount of, you know, I guess, basic rules. And if they can't make that deadline, then again, they're not serious.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with Tor. I mean, it's wonderful that the city does post that. My experience, sometimes I wonder if people actually read that, because people have asked me basic questions that were all listed on there. It seems to me, my experience is most people pay attention to the forums, but it's good that the city does it, and I appreciate that. And I have no problem with the deadline.
I will say on a practical note, I know in my case that was the first one I did, which made doing the one for the newspaper and the radio a lot easier. They looked amazingly similar for some reason.
Sarah, before I can respond to Crystal's question, I have a question for you. Do you post all of the information at the same time, or do you do it as received?
We post it as received.
So, and this might be a moot point for most, but I guess, Crystal, if I have no skin in the game either way, I'm happy to go either way on that. But my only concern would be is if we accepted submissions up until essentially election day, does that infer bias upon the city because we posted some earlier and then some later? I want to make sure that people understand that they're posted as received and not, well, we posted this person's first because we like them, and then we posted this person's last because we don't. And I want to make sure that that's very clear.
It's actually,
So
yeah, good point.
Sarah, can you refresh our memory with respect to the webpage? You break it up into 3 sections. So you say mayoral, assembly, school board, and you're saying you do it in the order of receipt,
Correct.
but they all have to be received before an established deadline? Or have you been posting some after the fact?
Oh, we post them as we receive them. Yeah.
So right now you're taking them after this deadline that you established, because I know you emphasized that when I was running, that there is a time that I should turn it in by, and I met that deadline. But you're saying right now you do accept and post after that kind of soft deadline?
No. Not after the 2 week.
Okay, and
After-
you don't do it alphabetical, you do it when you receive it?
Well, we post them as we receive it, and then Jess organizes them alphabetically. But we have not accepted anything after that 2 week candidate filing deadline.
Okay. I don't know, I think I'm gonna stand on this one and make a motion. But I think just to express, I think that there is a question of access and who is accessing the seats at the city assembly. And we've spoken to this, and we have to look at even the nuances of this language. And so I think if we don't feel strongly one way or another, we need to question, are the same candidates running? Are we reaching different pools who probably don't have experience running an election? For us, it was easy. For me, I had help. And so people were pushing me to get that submitted. I don't want to penalize someone and almost in a way exclude them, because I know how hard it is to run for these seats. And until we see a body that's reflective of the community, I think I'm going to stress that we need to take those considerations into account. So
I guess just because I didn't give you that, my opinion on the deadline is kind of from what Tor said. And I understand we need to make things as accessible as possible, but a person who's running for this office should have the ability to meet a deadline such as that, because if they are elected, they're going to be making very crucial decisions that affect the entire community. I don't think a couple weeks is too much of an ask to happen. That's just my opinion. Thank you.
Tim? Thank you. Yeah, I think deadlines are important. I mean, I get, Crystal, I get what you're saying about access and you know, when you do it for the first time, I mean, filling out the packet that was all new to me when I started this. So I understand what you're getting at. But you know, I think Stephen makes a good point about making sure that we as the city don't lead one way or the other. So I think a deadline is a good idea. Maybe 2 weeks is too short, but you know, but I think we need to make sure that we put some sort of parameters around it. So.
And this probably isn't going to add too much to the conversation, but I did choose that deadline because that's the last day for a candidate to withdraw. And so I felt if they were going to withdraw, then, you know, if they were on the fence, they wouldn't have to turn in their materials until then.
So for clarity, again, when we go back to that website, and I'm trying to look at last year's and remember from memory, so you receive an item, and again, Jess doesn't do it based off of date received. She does it based off of candidates' names. I'm just thinking to the favoritism. So this will rise to the top because they submitted it later, and then the city has taken a position that we're endorsing. Is that how it works? How do you organize the website? Is it alphabetical?
It's alphabetical in the end. But if, you know, John Smith submits something for assembly, it's his, you know, if he's the first one, it's going to be his under assembly. And then if Jane Doe submits, it's going to be Jane Doe and then John Smith.
So
under
just
assembly.
Just going back to Stephen's question. So if somebody submitted something 1 month, so well after the deadline that we have, do you immediately put that one in the top of the assembly pool because they just submitted it, or do you alphabetize it and put it? Are we taking a position? Does it appear that we're taking a position in the way that we order it, or do we do it alphabetical?
We do it alphabetically.
Okay, so that's not an issue.
No.
Okay. I have to make this motion. I would move to remove line starting on 69. Information received after the deadline will not be published on the municipal website.
A motion's been made. Is there a second? The motion dies for lack of a second. We're back to the main motion, unamended. Crystal?
So I don't mind that there wasn't a second to vote on that. I don't think it would have passed, but again, I support all the work that Sarah did. But because that couldn't be addressed as a single item, I'm going to vote no on this.
Further deliberation on ordinance 23-05. Sarah?
Okay, on the motion to approve ordinance 2023-05 on first reading, Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
Ms. Duncan,
No.
Mr. Pike,
Yes.
Mr. Mosier,
Yes.
and Mayor Eisenbeis.
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes 5-1 on first reading.
It is past the top of the hour, so we will take a brief recess. Assembly, please be seated when you're ready to continue. We're always looking for money, Dan. Do you have any? I know, I thought I could talk loud enough to get him to, but he saw my red light come on. He sure jumped. Dan, we miss you when you're not here. Thanks for showing up. I said, we miss you when you're not here. Thanks for showing up. We're just giving you a little bit of a hard time because we love you that much. All right, the assembly is seated. That'll bring us to additional new business items this evening. Item D, please.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and make a motion to go into executive session because it was requested for this item. I move to go into executive session under the statutory category of discussing matters which by law, municipal charter, or ordinances are required to be confidential, invite the assessor Larry Reeder and the applicant Ronald Dick into executive session, I guess.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to go into executive session. Just confirming, Mr. Dick, that you do want to go into executive session to discuss this item. All right, because you do have the option to have it discussed in open session if necessary. So thank you for that confirmation. Is there any public comment on going into executive session to discuss these matters?
Richard Weem. Actually, there's one way you have the ability not to go in executive session, and that is just to realize that he should get the exemption and move right to it. Period. An exemption like that, if done for the whole year, is worth $900, which is significant amount of money. I know people may not think so, but if you had it of the mind to just give it to him. How many of these have come through in the past? I don't remember one.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
So, no, I'm talking about,
Yes.
I believe that this is, this person to be heard is on the, to go into executive session.
That's right.
It seems like he's talking more about the value of the agenda item.
No, I'm saying.
Sir, I understand that you are talking about jumping straight past executive session, but it has been raised that you are perhaps getting a little outside. If you could keep your comments to going into executive session and
So-
in the affirmative or negative of that.
Fine. Don't go into executive session because it's a valuable exemption and there's no reason not to give it to the Honorable Ron Dick. Thank you.
Is there any other public comment on entering executive session to discuss these matters? Assembly deliberation? Sarah, on entering executive session?
Okay, on the motion to go into executive session, Ms. Duncan,
Yes.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
Mr. Pike,
Yes.
Mr. Mosier,
Yes.
and Mayor Esenbeis.
Yes,
Motion passes 6-0. We'll be meeting in room 4.
thank you.
I'll make a motion to reconvene as the assembly.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. We are reconvened as the assembly in regular session.
I move to waive Ronald Dick's failure to timely file his application for the senior citizen property tax exemption and authorize the assessor to accept the application as if timely filed based on the finding that Mr. Dick has shown good cause as such as defined in Sitka General Code 4.12.025 G1.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to accept the application from Mr. Dick. Is there any public comment?
I'm very happy to see that the exemption was granted because it is clearly the right thing. One important thing on when you have some of these deadlines, as you did with the one prior agenda item, when you have an exemption like this, it's based upon your birthday. And I think that there should be no deadline but your birthday, which in essence it is. So you should be able to file the day after your party. And that way it'll be a rolling and people will be able to get it. And the city will prorate the amount of money. If you have your birthday on January 2nd, you'll get a full prorate back on your assessment. But if it's in the middle of the year, you will get half back. And I think that the solution here is not to stress people out because it is a valuable exemption and make it birthday oriented. The dates that they have are not typical for deadlines. And it's, I'm glad you did the right thing.
Any other public comment on the waiver? Assembly deliberation? Sarah?
Okay, on the motion to grant the waiver, Mr. Mosier,
Yes.
Mr. Pike,
Yes.
Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
Ms. Duncan,
Yes.
Mayor Eisenbeis,
Yes.
and Ms. Carlson.
Yes.
The motion passes 6-0 on item D.
All right, now we jump into the grants. That'll be item E, please.
I move to approve resolution 2023-15 on first and final reading, authorizing the municipal administrator to apply for and execute a grant for the community transportation program with the Alaska Department of Transportation and Public Facilities for the Catlean Avenue paving and improvement project.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. John, I understand Melissa has an introduction for this one. Melissa, you might as well just make yourself comfortable. I think it's
the
pretty much
Melissa
your
show.
show from here on out.
Okay,
If you have a brief introduction on this one.
I do. So good evening, Mayor and Assembly members. Melissa Henshaw, Public and Government Relations Director. This opportunity is partnering with the state for the paving and improvements to Catlean. It gives the options that have been laid out by the Finance Director in the memo of funding choices. So as noted in the previous meeting, the water sewer are aging and we would want to get those replaced at this time. Also, we've heard from the electric department that this would be a good opportunity for them to get the electrical underground. So we would integrate that as well. In recent conversations with DOT, they entered us in for the 3-point match commitment because they knew what the direction was from the assembly at the last meeting, but we can get this updated if we change the resolution tonight. They noted that the 3-point match commitment brings our tentative score up to where their office cutoff is likely set. So what they don't know is how well it will compare to the other regions' projects and if it will ultimately proceed to the project evaluation board. So if the assembly provides additional funding, they said, it will obviously have the potential to bring up the score further and make it more competitive. The field offices will be meeting mid-April, so very soon at the end of this week to set the final cutoff and determine which projects will proceed. Haley laid out some options in the memo for higher match amounts and more points after giving a conservative preliminary projection for the FY23 surplus that we would assume would go into the sinking fund. So 3 options are presented. 2 to earn 4 points, 1 lowering the transfer into the sinking fund for about $530,000 for the FY25 budget, and another allocating FY '24 capital and to take that from the amount of the Lincoln Street project down the road. The third option is to earn 5 points by lowering the transfer to the sinking fund by a little over $1 million. If the assembly chooses to change the match commitment from the 5.1% greater than the minimum at the total match percent of just over 14 for the $1.5 million at 3 points, the change would need to be made in the therefore be it resolved section at line 39 to change the percent and the total amount. The conversation I did have with Harmon brought up an interesting point that this project is a project that needs to be completed, and either we're going to be awarded a grant or we will pay 100%. So this may be something to think about as we look at match funding. And we have both Harmon and Haley here if there's any questions or you want to hear from them.
Great, appreciate that. I'm sure we'll have questions as the process goes on. Is there any public comment on resolution 23-15?
Good evening, Richard Weem. When last we met, there was the discussion of exactly what percentage points should be given to this. It was a discussion direction, so how much should be given? There were 5 points. The assembly chose the middle ground. I don't know whether it was just trying to be middle ground, or were they seriously considering how important or not important this is? For example, in the paper and in the resolution, it says that it's a total of 1.496, 1.496 million. And what is really the truth is that we already had $900 some odd thousand already earmarked for this. And in essence, we will have to pony up $569,987. So that money has to come from somewhere. The amount of money that we have in surplus, I think, was mentioned at 17. But what's important to know is that excuse me, my throat's a little dry. What's important to know is that it is $1.5 million in essence. And you have to know that all of these things come with a cost. And so you heard Ms. Henshaw state that it's going to have to come from somewhere, whether it's reducing the sinking fund or taking it out of Lincoln Street construction or whatever. The truth of the matter is, if you want another point, you'd have to pony up another $1 million, or tonight increase the allocation from about 569,000. And if you want the full 5 points, it would have to be an additional $1.6 million. And that's a decision. I know exactly what I would do, but that's a decision you're going to have to make tonight. How badly do you want this? We'll remind you that there's only $110 million throughout the state granted, and this project will cost $10.5 million, and you're only allowed a max of $15 million. So in essence, if everybody is doing a $10 million grant, you only have 11 grants throughout the state. So the question is, how badly do you want this? And as always, where will the money come from? So do the right thing. Think about it, and it'll be an interesting deliberation to watch. Thank you.
Any other public comment on resolution 23-15? Assembly deliberation.
Well, I was gonna say, after the last meeting, Tim pulled me aside and kind of changed the way I was kind of hoping you would jump in first. The way I think about this a little bit, because every dollar counts, and we've got lots of competing things going for our money. But at the same time, this is one we've been working on forever. I mean, and the last time we worked on Catlean, it was not great. I mean, it was a compromise, and nobody was happy. So I don't know. I am starting to lean towards trying to get a few more points. So I'm just gonna leave it at that for now and see what everybody else thinks.
Yeah, Crystal?
I have a question for Melissa. Yeah. You gave us a nice summary and I try to take notes up here. I just wanted to make sure, did you indicate that after speaking or connecting with, as far as the minimum, we know that it could be anywhere from 0 to 5 points and 2 is kind of the required. Did I hear that 3 is not going to get us much more? It sounded like I heard 3 points is the minimum and we don't know how competitive that is. Did I just reason that in my head or is that where we're at?
That's basically it. So you're looking at 0 to 5 points. 0 points for the minimum of 9.03%. If you're going to add to it, you do get more points. But in my last conversation with DOT, like I had said, their cutoff is going to be 3. So nothing is going to move past their initial review to the next step with just 3 points.
So we don't know, we know it's going to be competitive. We know other people are putting forth their bid. We know that we're at the minimum and that's their cutoff point. We're lucky to have moved forward for consideration, but we're not going to by any means get the full points. And the question is, what is our backup plan? So if we don't get this grant, do we come back for an appropriation? As the assembly, what would our plan be if we don't want to be competitive, if we want to save as many dollars on our match here, what else are we theorizing might get us there? And that's just kind of an open question. And I'm kind of stumbling over that too. So I'm the one who came in a little bit higher as far as 3, but wanted 4. I think it would make us more competitive. And I like when they will pay for the majority of it if we come through with a stronger match. So I'm still at that place.
I think you're exactly where I'm at right now, that if we don't get this grant, there's not enough funds to do the project as evidenced by having to pull from multiple other funds just to find the match. So we are definitely in that really, really hard spot. So yeah, I can easily support finding more match somehow. But then I'm going to contradict myself and say that I know the assembly had a discussion about it, but using visitor enhancement funds for this project is not a warm and fuzzy for me. I think that money should be allocated for, perhaps a wayfinding when we do need that. So visitor enhancement funds, I'm not exactly a fan of using those, but yeah, let's find more money. It makes it easy, doesn't it?
So a quick question before, I just want a question. So when will we have to come up with the money? And then I'll leave.
It's going to be a little bit of time. So they're expecting to be awarded or notify us of the award in June. And then it takes anywhere from 6 to 12 months, 18 maybe, to come up with a actual grant agreement. So in that meantime, we're still working through all of the details of the partnership, right?
So just to be clear, we would have at least another fiscal year, if not 2, to come up with the money.
It's possible because unless you have special permission, you can't spend money on a project prior to that grant agreement being in place.
Melissa Haley, does that give you eye twitches when we say we'll spend money and then find the source for it later? And any other questions for Melissa while she's up here? We can always call her back. JJ, please.
We're talking about whole points. Can we get like a 4.5 or a 4.8 or 4.26?
I don't believe it works like that, no.
Thank you, Melissa. Appreciate it. Tim?
Yeah, I think, and having more time to think about it, I think we should, shoot the moon on this one. And because this is a chance to get the money, and, if we don't get it, then we're not spending any of it. So at this point in time. So I think, and considering the time frame of trying to sort out where we're going to get it from, we may have another, we will probably have another fiscal year to come up with that match. So, we're going to invest in it one way or the other, like I said last time, and I firmly believe that, and the sooner the better. So given the best shot at it, I think makes the most sense for us at this point in time. It's not going to get cheaper the longer we wait.
Just another observation on that is that we're not just saying, okay, we'll find the money somewhere, but we could take it from, we talked about the infrastructure shrinking fund. And if our surplus is that when we have we find other ways, or we identify other monies that we can replace it. So it's not like it's a pure, oh, we'll find the money. It's like, okay, we're going to take it from this fund and try really hard to get that money back into the fund, or at least some of it as those next 2 fiscal years move on. And I have to say that I think I'm there with you. You changed my mind the other day that I think if we're going to go for this, we should go for it and go for the full 2.5.
Yeah, I think that's the only way we're competitive. Crystal?
No, I was just wondering, so you made a statement about visitor enhancement fund. Did you want Melissa to speak to that and whether or not she thinks it's appropriate to, because they gave us 3 options, and I want to thank staff for putting that together based off of our discussion the last time. And I actually copied that and I put it down. There were 2 options if we go for 4 points and then 1 for 5. Visitor enhancement is listed there in the amount of like 200,000, but then there are other potentials. So I don't know how in the weeds we need to get, or if that was just kind of a standalone statement about visitor enhancement, or where we needed to go as far as what number we land on, and if we needed to decide a course based off of the options tonight.
My understanding is the assembly as a whole has already gone down that path, so I don't want to. I will accept the will of the body at that point, but I just had to say I'm not comfortable using that pot. So it's a standalone comment on its own, and I'm not going to rehash a previous assembly decision.
Okay, because it's built into all 3 options. So
Stephen. I think, we do need to identify where as Tor says, where the money's coming from. And I think this does a good job of laying that out. But then we do have the time to go back and say, actually, we can do it from this instead. Is considering it's not going to be expended for some time to come, minimum of 6 months. I think we can look at this as we go forward. I'm not comfortable saying, yeah, we'll figure out where it comes from. Melissa's done a good job of laying out where it's going to come from. And we can say yes to this and then come back and say, in actuality, we want to do it this way. So, I think that's why, if we don't do it, go as far as we can on this one, we're not going to get it. And we may not get it anyway, in which case, this has been an interesting exercise, but.
Kevin, you had something earlier.
Yeah, I was a little hesitant at last meeting, but I kind of agree with everyone here. Now that I've had time to think about it, I think it is better to do as much as we can. And so I would be in favor of definitely a higher amount. But Crystal does bring up a good point. The visitor enhancement, the 220,000 is in all 3 options. So if we're not going to use that, we would have to get that from somewhere else as well. I would like to do it as high as we can, as much as we can. But I want to make sure that if we don't get it, my only concern is that if we tie it up for an extended period of time, that could be going somewhere else or going to the infrastructure sinking fund, because that will be less we can put into the infrastructure sinking fund. And if we don't, that's inevitably where this money is going to go anyway, some sort of infrastructure. I just don't want any surplus that we might have to be allocated for something like this. And then if we didn't get it, then that just kind of get absorbed into the largesse of city government. I would want to make sure that that amount actually goes to the infrastructure sinking fund should we not receive this. That makes sense. But yeah, I'm in favor of trying to get as much of this as we can.
With that thought, I move to amend the resolution on line 39 to $2,555,125.70. Don't forget the 70 cents. And we have to have get a quick, what is the percentage on that? 15.1%.
Right. So we can round up and then it would be 24.13%. because it's 9.03 plus the 15.1 instead of 5.1.
So moved.
There's a motion on the floor to
Second.
increase our match to 24%. It's been moved and seconded to increase our match to 24.13% on this application. Is there any public comment on the increase of match money?
Good evening. My name is Richard Weem. This is an interesting conundrum. In a very real way, since it is Easter, I'll mention Peter and Paul. This is, and we're not talking mounds. Sometimes you feel like a nut. But the important thing here is that in order to utilize this money, we are not wealthy enough where it has to come from another fund in order to do that. And with this particular project and the way this is set up, you should actually seek the highest possible, not 4, but to go for 5. And that would mean ponying up the extra $1.6 million, because it's kind of like the story that kids don't read anymore called The Lady or the Tiger. And there were 2 doors. It's a great little story. But the important thing here is you are literally faced with, if you don't get the grant, it will, 1, either cause delays for what you are looking for. And as we know, costs will invariably increase, but you want to be in the best possible position. And the best possible position is go for the maximum amount, because you never know when this will come out. And it's funny, it was mentioned, well, you'd rather pay it for wayfaring signage. Well, if the road deteriorates anymore, you'll need probably a GPS to find your way down there. So it might be for visitor enhancement funds sooner or later. So I would go big or not at all. So 15.1% total, which means that's 5 points, and that's added on to the $926,238. So go.
Is there any other public comment? Thank you.
My name is Scott Celine. I live on Catlian. I want to thank you guys for being here tonight. I think you should go for it. If you just look at the transformer across from Murray Pacific there, and then understand that your enterprise fund has it to where the new owners of Sitka Sound had to put in the transformer just to reduce the Wilde leg for their voltage. And there's still not enough power down Catlian to fire up the ice plant that Marabini, the previous owners of Sitka Sound, installed at $22 million when the dog salmon. Anyway, there's a lot going on down there at Catlian, and I don't really think there has been input like it says on the whereas in here, but I fully, recommend that you study the last time that the city got funding to do Catlian, and they were going to bury the power at that time too. But good luck. Thank you.
If you could push the button on the bottom so that there's a red light. Thank you.
I kind of got stove up the last time I came to one of your meetings. I fell and I kind of told a story that to my insurance that said, no, it was, I landed on my own property. I consider all of Sitka my home. So anyway, I just, on this particular issue, I have a lot of elders, Tlingit elders that live on Catlian and other places that are having a lot of issues. Old houses are falling down, sidewalks aren't safe. And I'd like to see you consider, rehabilitating that area. I walk there myself. So thank you.
Any other public comment on increasing the match for this application? Assembly deliberation on increasing the match? Tor, I just want to clarify, you're looking at using option 3 to cover that match, which would earn 5 points. So reallocating from the public infrastructure sinking fund at this point.
That was my intention. It may not have been what I said, but that was my intention.
Okay, thank you. I just needed clarification on that. Further deliberation on increasing the match? Sarah?
Okay, on the amendment to increase the match to 24.13%, Mayor Eisenbeiss,
Yes.
Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
Mr. Pike,
Yes.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
Ms. Duncan,
Yes.
and Mr. Mosher.
Yes.
Okay, the amendment passes 6-0.
Brings us back to the original resolution as amended. JJ?
I've got some questions for the Public Works Director, if you can come forward, Michael. Thank you. So this project is called Catlian Avenue Paving and Improvements Project. The improvements are the widening of the sidewalk and the stormwater. Is water, wastewater, and electrical part of this, or is that something that we'd be finding additional funding for?
Be something we need to find additional funding for. Definitely would be a good time to do that. All of the above, get all the infrastructure done while we're in there. We do have very limited right-of-way width to be widening, so we'll be coming up with creative ways to maybe change the cross section, look at options to improve multimodal access to it, but it's going to be a challenging one with the limited right-of-way we have to work with.
So would the design for those additional components, water, wastewater, electrical, how would we, the city, coordinate engineering with the state DOT?
We typically do that through a agreement between the state and us. We possibly, and there's different ways to do that. We can put our money over to them and they would manage the whole thing. We've done that in the past, or we can manage pieces of it and have a partnership. It ultimately generates one bid package, one contractor. You don't want to have multiple contractors in there at once. So one way or the other, the partnership will arrive at that point.
With construction, looks like 4 years out, is that enough time to do a partnership?
It really would be funding dependent. I think that's the big unknown, is work on the funding package, and once that is activated, that's really our marching orders to get going on it. So without that, and we're in a difficult situation when we don't have dedicated revenues set up for projects like this to plan for the future when it's very unknown like that. So it's something we're going to work on that is big to the goals of asset management and get more organized in terms of what our core infrastructure is, and then put that focus there. So yeah, it's realistic, but a lot has to start moving soon for all that to come together.
If we did get this grant notification in June, would that change some of the priorities within your department, maybe moving away from Lincoln Street and focusing on this, or how would you or direct your staff?
Yes, we would need to look at what projects would shuffle down as a lower priority and have to make some tweaking there. And we haven't looked at it from that perspective yet. We don't know how realistic the odds are on this, so I don't want to start moving things around, but anything new coming in that wants to be constructed in the next 5 years would require something to bump down the bump in front, because that's the backlog that we have currently.
it's great that this money is out there and paving is part of it. It's just unfortunate that that's what's leading, because that's what that's your frosting on your cake, whereas all the utilities under the road need to somewhat happen first, and the indeterminate location of a lot of these systems is also very challenging. So that's part of this overall conversation, is how do we fit these other pieces in since we're restructuring it? Not exactly directly tied to this grant, but there's a bigger thing happening here that needs to be looked at. Thank you, Michael.
And if we don't plan for it, we just wasted everybody's time. So I would agree. John, small task for you. No big deal. Anything else on the resolution? Sarah?
All right, on the resolution as amended, Ms. Duncan,
Yes.
Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
Mayor Eisenbeiss,
Yes.
Mr. Pike,
Yes.
and Ms. Carlson.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0 on item E.
As it is about the top of the hour, we'll take a brief recess assembly. Come back when you're ready. All right, the assembly is back, so we will continue on our agenda tonight with item F.
I move to approve resolution 2023-14 on first and final reading, authorizing the municipal administrator to apply for a Denali Commission grant under the Infrastructure Fund Program area for $1,099,165 for the purchase of a 150-ton haul out lift for the Gary Paxton.
As a clarification, item F, the housing study.
We'll get there soon. I move to approve resolution 2023-13 on first and final reading, authorizing the municipal administrator to apply for a Denali Commission grant under the housing program area for $300,000 for a housing land feasibility study.
Although if they wanted to give us $1 million for this one, I'd take that too. It's been moved and seconded. Melissa, you have an introduction for this one as well?
Yes, and you don't get $1 million with this one. Melissa Henshaw, Public and Government Relations Director again. The next two items are the Denali Commission grants. This one is pertaining to the housing land feasibility study that the Planning and Community Development Department is heading up. This program, this grant program is to promote rural development throughout Alaska, specifically for infrastructure and workforce and economic development programs, and it has 10 different program areas. So the application opportunity opened early February. It's due April 14th, and this is for requests of up to $300,000 for the housing program area. Applications will be reviewed this spring and notification of award will be in June. There will be time for award negotiation through the summer and fall with funds available January 2024 with this program. There's no match commitment for non-construction grants. And as noted in the memo, both the comp and the strategic plan identify housing needs as priorities and goals, and included in the FY24 draft budget. There's a $750,000 included for the housing development work. The hope is to use this grant to offset these costs and preserve what we can for further if other opportunities arise, leverage the funding. So this funding opportunity requires us setting priority of the applications. Since we are submitting 2 applications, we're submitting this one as priority number 1. And that's all I have for that.
Great, thank you. Is there any public comment on resolution 23-13?
Good evening, Richard Weem. Priority 1, if you look at the other, which we'll hear in a minute, I don't know, you may scratch your head on that. As you know, housing is a priority in Sitka. In the administrator's budget, there is already $750,000 which is allocated. So I presume that this additional $300,000 may offset that budget item, or it may enhance it. The important thing here is that I think there is so much talent here in Sitka as it relates to contractors and everything else. It's always great for asking for money and maybe you get lucky, but we were already anticipating spending $750,000, which would be nice to push over budget-wise to Kathleen and the grant. But there's enough talent here where I think people know where to build and where not. And I think that we could get great opinions on municipal land by asking stakeholders what's going on. But I never met, a grant or a budget item that I didn't love. And so I think there are other alternatives which are cheaper, and then we can then move money into other things. But please, thank you for your consideration.
Any other public comment on resolution 23-13? Assembly deliberation? Tor?
Let's just say, I want to, we talked about this during the budget meetings. And that after talking, because I go to all the P and Z meetings, this is, in my understanding, more of an engineering study than a feasibility study. It's like, where would we actually put lots? How far much would we have to dig? How much would it cost? So it's not like the No Name Mountain one is one of the main point, is that this is more like, we get done with this and we should have a pretty darn good idea of how many lots we can put on each one and where they would be, or what, at the very least, what challenges each piece of land would have. And so it's we do a lot of studies, but this one's more, like I say, I think of it more of an actual engineering type study.
Crystal?
I have a question for Melissa. I think you might have addressed this in a way that I wasn't understanding from the memos, but it sounds like Denali Commission, they have 10 million to split between 10 funds. One of those is housing. That's where this one's coming from. I guess I mentioned that because on the second memo, it did mention the pot is 10 million. So I guess my question was, for this one, what is the competitive landscape? Do we have any idea?
The funding opportunity announcement doesn't say exactly what the total of the housing program is. It just says up to 300,000.
Yeah, I noticed that. So I'm not misunderstanding that it's 10 million total to be split across these different areas. It's that we know for the next one, which is the request under GPIP, that one has $10 or 10 million set aside. This one, we don't quite know. There is a pool of money. We don't know how competitive it is, but we know that we can apply for up to 300,000, which is what we're doing.
Let me just look through this real quick.
And that was just clarification. As I read the memo, I was just, that's not holding it up. I'm supportive of us applying for this grant because I remember us allocating 750. And if 300 can come through a grant, I am all in full support. I just wasn't sure how big that pot was, how competitive it would be. And I didn't know if you might know that.
Well, I'll read this little portion to you from the funding opportunity announcement. Applicants may request awards up to 300,000 for the housing program area. The commission anticipates making one or more awards.
Okay. That's helpful. Thank you. But I am in support. I just wasn't sure how. Thank you.
Anything else for Melissa while we have her up here? Thank you. Appreciate it. Further deliberation? Sarah?
Right, on the motion to approve resolution 2023-13 on first and final reading, Mayor Eisenbeis,
Yes.
Ms. Duncan,
Yes.
Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
and Mr. Pike.
Yes.
The motion passes 6-0 on item F.
Brings us to item G.
I move to approve resolution 2023-14 on first and final reading, authorizing the administrator to apply for Denali Commission grant under the Infrastructure Fund Program area for $1,099,165 for purchase of a 150-ton haul out lift for the Gary Paxton Industrial Park haul out project.
Second.
That's been moved and seconded. Melissa, I told you, just get comfy. Please.
Melissa Henshaw, Public and Government Relations Director. This item is for application of a Denali grant, also due April 14th, for the purchase of a marine haul out lift as part of the phase 1 GPIP haul out project under their infrastructure fund program. This allows for grants up to $2 million, in which the commission anticipates making 5 or more awards from the bill, so the bipartisan infrastructure fund. There's no match required. It's a non-construction project. An example of the lift is in the packet. The lift will have the capacity to haul out the majority of the vessels in the Sitka fleet. So we're excited to tell our story in this application with regards to the vote of the $8.2 million to begin development of a haul out and show this project is a community priority. And we have Gary White in the audience if you have questions about the project.
Great. Appreciate the introduction. Is there any public comment on resolution 23-14?
Hello, Kim Elliott. I want to just speak quickly on this. My father's got a 50-foot overall sailboat, hasn't been able to get hauled out for 4 years. I know a lot of other local fishermen and recreational boaters that have the same problem. I urge you to do whatever you can to get a haul out as soon as possible and the equipment needed to take care of our boats. Otherwise, as a past harbor and a statewide member of, actually executive secretary for a statewide harbor association, I can tell you that Hoonah, Pelican, Wrangell, they're all going to get the business that should be coming here. And I don't care what it takes to haul my boat out if I don't have to run it with the fuel that's going to cost. And with a older father, he wouldn't appreciate if I said elderly, so I won't. But you know, we can't all go help him from somewhere else, but we can help him here. And we have other boats as well. So please, please see what you can do to get this through. And I'll also support the next one, but I am really tired and I'm not quite certain why they want to do another electrical upgrade. When I worked at the harbor and I saw that built, the Eliason one. And I can't quite figure out why they need to redo the electrical this soon. Thank you. Bye.
Good evening. This is Richard Weem. This has to do with a Denali Commission non-construction grant from the Infrastructure Fund program for $1,099,165 for a 150-ton lift for the haul out. Now, if you look tonight at the quarterly report from Public Works, it has the haul out project and the estimated amount, I don't remember precisely, I think it was like 12 million, even though the permanent fund had 8 million taken out of it. Bottom line is, by the time they get finished, it's probably going to cost a lot more. And then you're going to be in a position where you're going to have to end up finding millions of dollars to, in essence, to complete this. And that's why if I had to do a priority, you know, I don't pretend to know how the Denali Commission makes grants. For all I know, it could be a dartboard. I'm sure that communities around the state are all having difficulties, so there may be lots of requests. So I certainly would ask to get this one. If we don't get the $300,000 for the land survey, I mean, it's just in essence free money. And so it doesn't make as much of a difference. But to get this for a structural piece of equipment, I certainly would put it as a priority, because we know what the funding issues are with the haul out, and that any way we can expend it in a capital way, I think would be wonderful. So, and remember, there's only $10 million. So it's an interesting shuffle that's going to be here. And so on this one, may the force be with us. Thank you.
Is there any other public comment on the resolution? Back to the assembly for deliberation.
I have a
Kevin?
question.
I think it's kind of a no-brainer. There's no cost. This is no match required. So it's part of the plan to do the haul out. So I'm supporting it. Crystal?
Yeah, I have questions for Melissa. I had questions in line with the priority 1 versus priority 2. It's a smaller amount that we're requesting for the survey. This one can be up to $2 million. So I had a couple of questions related to that, but how did you guys decide? I know there's logic behind it, elevating one versus the other as far as our request.
Well,
Gary White and I had a conversation and we talked with Amy Ainsley and just sort of deferred to the housing with the new strategic plan out. And there was money already in the haul out project. There'll be other opportunities, I believe, for the GPIP haul out.
So are we thinking that the survey may exceed the 750 that we allocated in the fiscal year budget?
That I do not know.
What, can you repeat that question? Will the survey exceed
we-
the 750,000?
Yeah, are we thinking that costs may go beyond that? Because I know we set that aside thinking that we wanted to do this survey. And so this is just going to offset those costs. Like if we get rewarded or awarded 300,000, that would take down our contribution towards that survey to about 4, is that kind of the logic?
I don't necessarily know that that is the way that Amy has it structured. I think she left because her item was over, but she is currently working on a scoping of the entire project. But
Okay. I thought I had read in the memo that it would offset costs associated, and that's the only thing that we allocated towards that. So I thought that's what we were talking about.
I'm confused right now. Are we talking travel lift or housing?
housing.
Okay.
Well, I'm talking about the priority because we had to basically tell Denali that we're ranking this one higher. We want to be, if we had to choose between projects, the study. So I'm sorry that I'm bringing it up again. That's why I'm bringing it up though, is because we did base priority on the housing survey as opposed to this one, which the housing study is 300,000. This one can be up to 2 million. So I wasn't sure how we ranked those.
I think I can answer it. 300,000 will, yes, offset the budgeted amount of 750,000. It's not in addition to. That was our intent in the budget is we need an estimated amount of 750,000 to do this study. We're going to search for other grant opportunities that will bring that overall cost to the general fund down. As far as I think you're asking about the amount for the travel lift. The reason it's not 2 million is because that's the actual cost of the travel lift. But as Melissa said, there may be other opportunities, and given the strategic plan and the priorities put forward in the strategic plan, that's why this one ranked above the travel lift.
Okay, because when I'm just comparing two memos and I hear where we prioritize this one, I know that there's logic and there was discussion behind that. For me, I just look at numbers and I see a couple of questions. So the 2 million is the max that you could apply for. Again, this is free money. So I'm wondering, I know that that's the cost of the lift. Seeing that we have 4 million that we're searching for GPIP, was there not a way for us to say 2 million, the lift plus this? Or I know that it won't pay for construction, but was there not other possibilities to apply for? Or would we be asking too much and our competitive advantage disappears because we're requesting the full 2 million? What was the logic there?
I think the logic was, yeah, Gary's coming up, that it was sort of low hanging fruit, right? This is the easiest piece of machinery that we need, and we need to get this application in quickly.
So if I can add on to that, Gary White with GPIP. For first, I gotta say that the SICA team's done a really good job of networking with the Denali Commission. And I've had some conversations with my folks there, looking at where we probably have a better opportunity. And it kind of sounds like we have a better opportunity to get the housing money than we do to get this haul out money. And that's just based off of conversations, obviously, that they've got to go through their entire process, and they're gonna vet every application. But yeah, I've had that question on the haul out, like, why did we pick a piece of machinery? Last year, we applied to the Denali Commission for planning money so we could come up with a defined new cost estimate instead of using CPI adjustments off of our last cost estimate. And so we didn't have any hard numbers. And so what we were telling the Denali Commission is like, we can't really just make stuff up because we told you that we didn't have any hard numbers because we asked you for that last year. And this is the only piece of the project that we can get a defined cost because we went out and got a quote. So that's kind of why this showed up where it was.
Okay, and I appreciate that. And I know that I kind of meshed two separate grant applications, but the priority was a little bit confusing to me. It's free money. I hope we submit competitive applications for both of them, and I hope they're both rewarded. But I can see, you walking me through it, I appreciate that because I did have questions related to the amount that we requested and the priority that we did them. So thank you so much.
Any other questions for Gary or Melissa? JJ?
Thank you. Is there a time frame if we do receive this money that we have to spend it in?
I imagine there is. It's not something I know off the top of my head.
I'm not aware of the answer to that either. I know that there are with some federal funding sources. There's usually some rules tied to that, but
Yeah. It's usually
Denali
like 5
Commission
years.
operates a little bit differently, so I'm not aware of any timeline that they set out in the funding opportunity.
That was just a general question, because if we're asking for a specific piece of equipment that has to go into a bigger plan, and we're not quite sure of a construction time or an overall budget for general plan, like how would this specific piece of equipment help us? Would just be a beautiful thing out
Well,
there.
with the 8.2 roughly that was, voted on last October, and we do have a project charter, and we're currently working with an engineering firm to actually get us our updated cost. But the plan is that we're going to be able to start getting boats out of the water that are $8.2 million. We'll be able to put infrastructure in, which is the haul out piers, which this would be a very important part of it, obviously, to pull the boats. And if we can get this, that's another $1 million that we can start putting into upland improvements, because that's what we're hearing from folks, is they want to have electricity and all this other stuff that right now I don't think we can afford. But this will help us start moving in that direction. And I think staff's doing a good job of going after every single available pot of money we can find, because we know we're going to need more to have a full functioning haul up.
And the funding opportunity announcement doesn't state when those funds need to be expended by, but if it is attached to the, bipartisan infrastructure fund, then it's going to probably be in 5 years.
And that works with your time frame for the overall. Okay, I'm seeing nods. Great, thank you.
Just an FYI, we hope to have this thing functional by the spring of 25.
Anything else for Gary or Melissa? Thank you both. Appreciate it. Further assembly deliberation? Sarah?
Okay, on the motion to approve resolution 2023-14 on first and final reading, Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
Ms. Duncan,
Yes.
Mayor Eisenbais,
Yes.
Mr. Pike,
Yes.
and Mr. Christensen.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0 on item G.
Brings us to item H.
I move to approve resolution 2023-12 on first and final reading, authorizing the municipal administrator to apply for a Maritime Administration Department of Transportation Port Infrastructure Development Program grant for $4,711,399 with a 20% match commitment to support the Elias and Harbor Electrical System Replacement Project.
Second.
That's been moved in second. Melissa?
Melissa Henshaw, Public and Government Relations Director. Last but certainly not least is the Port Infrastructure Development Program through DOT for the Elias and Harbor Electrical System Replacement Project. This opportunity includes the movement of goods into, out of, around, or within a port. Operational improvements include projects to improve port resilience, environmental and emissions mitigation measures, including projects for port electrification. In a recent construction cost estimate, which is in your packet, this project is estimated to cost just under $6 million. The application is due April 28th. There's no minimum or maximum ask amount, and only one application is allowed to be submitted by an applicant. So for rural areas like Sitka, no match is required. We have heard from Alaska Municipal League that a match does impact the score, and it's suggested if communities have funds to provide them, as it certainly helps. So therefore, we recommend a 20% match for a total of approximately 1.18 million. These programs truly want to see the applicant have some skin in the game. Although the Assembly has already approved their appropriations totaling 5.1 million, paying for this project from working capital is a significant burden off the fund. So although the harbor itself is in good condition, the electrical system is beyond its useful life. Going back to 2018 and an inspection completed stated severe corrosion. A 2020 inspection reported the continued deterioration of that. We heard in 2021 that it needs to be replaced again. And as recently as we began this process, we had heard from an electrical engineer that we should probably just turn it off. So we've put in some safety guards in place currently, and now we're working on trying to get the entire thing replaced.
Great, thank you. Is there any public comment on resolution 23-12?
Good evening, Richard Weem. This has to do with the electrification project at Eliason Harbor. The good news is that this is a lot more money in the pot, but the bad news is there are a lot more people competing for it, even though our cause may be good. Just a reminder that the ask for the grant is like 4.7 million, and our match is 1.1 million for a total of 5.8. And, you know, all of these matches do add up. And one of the things about this process, I think we should have a board up here like the debt of the United States that they have somewhere down on Wall Street. And that we really need to have a running total of, you know, all of these votes and how much it's going to cost. Right this evening is like $2.7 million with these two grants if they are successful. So I think that that is important. You don't go to a restaurant like the Quilted Giraffe and start ordering bottles of Dom, and at the end of the night be surprised when your bill is a little more than your credit card can afford. One of the other things about the harbor system, and I think that it wouldn't be a bad idea at some point for the Assembly to hear overall what the deferred maintenance is going to be and what the overall cost is going to be to the city and where we're going to get that money. You're not going to be able to totally squeeze it out of the moorage rates. So, go for it. You're going to do that anyway, but always in the little thing in the back of your head, you need to understand no matter how important it is, you have to figure out where the money is. And that should be part of the fiscal notion. If we're successful, this is how we anticipate paying for it. And I think that that should be a part of every fiscal plan going forward. And we also need a running total. By the way, the US debt at this moment is $32 trillion. So that's just an FYI. Thank you very much.
Any other public comment on resolution 23-12? Assembly deliberation? One last call. JJ?
Got a question for Melissa on one of the bullet points here for the PIDP grant key factors. It says 25% of the funds are reserved for small projects and small ports. Is that us?
Yes, that is us. So anything under 11.25 million is a small project, and we are a small port.
Okay, then I don't know if this is part of the second whereas says that NOAA shows Sitka as the 16th port in the US. That seems like a high, like we'd be a big port. So I'm not sure if those factors correlate?
So that's with regards to like fish landings. It's a little bit different computation between the two.
Then how does that support our application? Or just why is it written there as a whereas?
Just to show the importance of the movement of goods, because that's what this really is about. If we don't have electrical service at Eliason, where are these boats going to go? Eventually, they're going to leave town. And so we won't be able to continue our movement of goods with the fishing community.
Perfect. Thank you. That makes total sense.
Anything else from Melissa while we have her up here? Thank you. Anything further from the assembly? Sarah?
Right, on the motion to approve resolution 2023-12 on first and final reading, Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
Mr. Pike,
Yes.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
Ms. Duncan,
Yes.
Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
and Mayor Eisenbais.
Yes.
The motion passes 6-0 on item H.
I'll bring us to persons to be heard. This is public participation for any item on or off of tonight's agenda, not to exceed 3 minutes for any individual. See, you said you had something to do too.
Mr. Mayor, assembly members, I'm Mike Finn, president of the Sick All Train Riders. I wanted to continue with just laying out some of the things that we've been doing with our club. Snow plowing, we had 8 plowers keeping the sidewalks cleared. Some of us are doing a lot of plowing. I personally plow 6 to 8 miles on snowy days, which is why we need some of these changes in the ordinances so we can get more plowers out there. We had some issues in the beginning with the state of Alaska plowers. They'd plow snow right back on the sidewalk we had just plowed. So I see Nick's here tonight. So he helped out and we got in touch with the state, figured out their plan. They plow from the water side to the uphill side. So on Sawmill Creek and HPR, we're only plowing the water side only. Some people had questions about that. We also paid for the fuel for most of the plowers. I still haven't identified some of them, so I'm trying to find out who some of the independent people were. We also have been helping out the elderly folks and those in need to shovel their decks and their driveways to take care of their personal property. We also want to help clean up the Harbor Mountain Road this year. Last year, we weren't on the road in time, but that's one of the reasons we need the trailers to do projects like that. We're also hoping the Cruise Off Island Cruisers, which is Nick's thing, to help clean up the landing at Cruise Off. We also created a $2,500 Lael Grant Memorial Scholarship for the students heading to a trade school. And we also are working with Sitka Trail Works on a grant to fix the bridges and roads on Cruise Off Island. We've also been talking with the Forest Service to put some cabins on the Sitka road system for those that don't have boats. Our group would help maintain those since they'll be on the road system. And finally, this weekend, Saturday, we are given free rides at the 3 to 5 preschoolers big rig event from 10 to 2 p.m. So you come out and see us. Thank you.
Free rides for big kids too. Anyone else? Thank you.
Hello, my name is Nicholas McGraw, 44-year resident of Sitka. Been here all my life and love it here. Don't want to go anywhere else. I came tonight to speak because of the Catlian Road paving discussion that went on earlier. It was noted that it's the top of the priority list, or it's number 1 on the priority list. I'm not sure if I would guess a lot of you have driven other roads around here lately, and there's quite a few roads that are in way more disrepair than Catlian is. I understand that repaving Catlian might be the key to getting some of the underground stuff done. But of course, if we can't get all that underground stuff done, I don't think that money would be well used or spent towards Catlian Street. Couple of the streets I wanted to note, Cascade Street behind the old hospital, that is horrible. Filling potholes in that is barely even a Band-Aid. It's horrible. I'd highly encourage any of you to take a drive, even Lake Street. Lake Street's got some things going on, and of course, it's a busy street as well. And Peterson, same way, that whole loop there are in bad shape. I would say worse shape than Catlean. As far as the infrastructure underneath, I'm not sure how old that is. A couple other ones I would note, Jarvis Street past the city shops up there towards the transfer station, all that's is pretty much almost gone. Price Street going towards Burkhart and Lance, I can almost guarantee that street gets more traffic than Catlean. And it's in pretty bad shape as well. And of course, that all takes money, and that's out of my hands, or not my deal or spiel. Of course, one other thing to think about, money wise, if we have all these electric vehicles, they don't pay fuel tax, they don't pay that type of stuff. So where does that money come from? That's another thing to think about. One last quick thing, the normal spring cleanup got delayed. I would like to suggest that we try and work on something to maybe allow a customer to dispose of one car a year for the year instead of at just spring cleanup. I used to work that event, and I would see at least 100 every year cars come out there at one blast, and it's way overwhelming. So I'd like to see something like that come up. Thank you for your time.
Richard Weem, thank you for the persons to be heard tonight. What a blessing that Mike Finn listed here. What a community service and helping, giving in ways which are just remarkable. So what that means is you better do what he says. Otherwise, you ain't going to get a ride tomorrow or a Saturday, and your driveway is not going to be plowed, or your sidewalk. The other thing with Nick McGraw, I think what he says hits a real point. I know in places like New Jersey, people lose elections on potholes, and those are big voting issues. So please keep that in mind. And that represents one of the many, 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 many things that we have here. So you have to spend, I'll say, our money wisely. Some interesting points are that when you look about affordable housing, I still have that question about Harbor Point, which is right across from the McGraw dock. I think that would have been ideal housing place right off the road system, utilities right there, et cetera. But we were told no, no, no. And then we spent 160, 180,000 to say that, well, that's best purpose is recreation. And I'd like to ask what the status of Harbor Point is now. This will be the second year that I don't know whether we've received any money or not. I think there needs to be an assembly update. And just as an aside, the agenda tonight is kind of indicative of how things are probably going nationally, but certainly in Sitka. Everything is grant, grant, grant. There is very little that we can do if we don't pay because we have the inability to pay for it ourselves. And so I think you need to take this into consideration when you do forward thinking. And I don't think much of that is going on. I think that, I mentioned before about 1 million barrels per day coming off. What is that going to do to cruise lines? I saw an article about Carnival Cruises. One of their big expenses is, guess what? Fuel. And all of these things are going to be hitting. This year may be slightly hot, but if you look at global and national economies, I'm afraid that you are not going to be able to count these chickens every year. It's not going to be in this enormous growth cycle. And so you really have to think about it. Another little point is I read legislative bills, and there's, I think it's Senate Bill 142. They want to put a 2% sales tax on, and municipalities are exempt, but the utilities are not exempt. So all of those utility burdens that we're going to have, somebody in Juneau wants to add another 2%. If somebody can correct me, please do. Thank you.
Anyone else under persons to be heard this evening? Seeing none, that'll bring us to reports. For my report this evening, gonna summarize, well, actually, one important thing first. I'd just like to remind everybody of the upcoming changes at the light at Lake and Lincoln Street. The state has not yet notified us when that is gonna happen. They said by May 1st, correct? May 1st is creeping up on us real fast, and I don't see very many painting days. But remind citizens that there will be some light changes at Lake and Lincoln Street in order to help facilitate traffic flow there. So that is upcoming. We haven't heard anything different. But for the rest of my report, I want to summarize our trip to Florida and to sea trade. Overall, this was a good trip. It was a little different this year. We didn't man the booth. We didn't sit and wait for people to come to us. We found them. We went out to them and we had meetings. A couple things across the three major lines that we met with. We met with representatives from Holland, Royal Caribbean, and Norwegian. They kind of had the same message across the board. Boats are going to be mainly full this year when they come in. They do anticipate the numbers being flat going forward for the next couple of years, as far as they were able to tell us. It was unanimous on everyone who we spoke to that the task force we started was a good idea. They think we're in an opportune time to take advantage of that and are supportive of the idea. Undoubtedly, the cruise lines will be listening to the conversations and then chime in when they have the opportunity to. Some of the highlights of last year's tour season, according to their representatives, on guest surveys, we came back as a pretty highly rated port. It was noted that we were clean, friendly, and safe. Along with the safe, I will say that a lot of citizens felt that the street closure downtown was very safe. And I know that was one of the things we were trying to do with that closure, is to provide that safety. Some of the things that needed improvement, there were concerns about the distance the cruise ship terminal was from town. Not much we can do about that one. And there was also concern about lack of excursions. I know a lot of people are ramping up excursions this year, so hopefully that'll be alleviated some. Along the same lines of excursions, talked to a lot of the onboard marketing people, and they are happy. I will compile the information and make sure I have correct emails for everyone, but they're happy to get that information out to local vendors who may be interested in selling on board the cruise ships as well. I've floated that idea to a couple people since I've gotten back already, and they're excited to at least have that conversation. So I know it's been previously a pretty big burden. How do I get on the cruise ship? How do I talk to them to market my excursion, my business, whatever? So now we'll have a mechanism for that fairly simply. Let's see. I did have a discussion briefly with all of the lines, and they all seemed supportive of exploring the idea. I don't know if anyone has seen Juneau's memorandum of agreement with the cruise lines. They have a limit on the cruise ships that can enter the port every day, and all of the lines that we spoke to were interested in exploring that idea here in Sitka. So they didn't shut the door in our face, but we'll see what that potentially could bring. And then finally, I threw it out kind of as a joke to all three of the lines as well, but I might have had one or two solid bites on them. I challenged each line to outdo the other line in a pothole challenge to see who could fill the most potholes here in town. So we'll see if anyone bites on that and starts filling some potholes for us. And I'd happily spray paint Royal Caribbean filled this hole on a pothole if they'd want to fill that. So just trying to look for ways where cruise agencies can give back to the community for the time and effort that we spend on them and that they spend in town. So overall, I think it was a good trip. It was definitely a different perspective than just sitting at a booth all day, much more productive. And we actually had an extra day this time as opposed to last year, which allowed a little flexibility in our schedules so that, we actually, one member from Royal Caribbean wasn't able to make it, but then we met up with them later. And I think the advantage of going in person, we were in the Holland meeting room, and the CEO and multiple other people just happened to be available. So we got their ear for a minute too. That doesn't typically happen. But I know I told the assembly I would come back and say, should we go again? A lot of the meetings can happen here in Sitka or by Zoom, but we wouldn't have had that opportunity to shake hands with the CEO of Holland America Line without that. So it's debatable. I think the meeting was productive and worth the time. But if the expense isn't what the assembly wants, I think there's other ways to do it as well. John, for your report.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I just want to add one little bit to your summary there from Seatrade. And I'm sure Melissa will smile about this one when you talked about the shore excursions and any new entrants to selling on board the cruise ships. It did bring up the issue of sales tax, because we've had some challenges in the past where people selling the shore excursions will sell them in a wholesale type package to the ship, and whether or not the ship is collecting and remitting sales tax, we don't know. So we at least put that bug in their ear to make sure that the final point of sale and the service being provided here, that sales tax is being collected appropriately. Otherwise, I just want to offer a thank you to staff. For the first time in this job, I finally took a vacation and I unplugged the phone and I didn't talk to anyone the whole time that I was out. But that said, I came back and saw this agenda, and it was pretty amazing, the work that was put together. So I was learning about most of the items in here. Since yesterday was my first day back in the office, I was learning about most of these items as you guys were learning about these items. So thank you to staff for all the hard work in putting this together.
Brian?
I will be on leave soon. My first day out will be Monday, April 24th. My first day back in the office will be Tuesday, May 9th. I will be traveling abroad, so because of the time differences, I will not call in for the next assembly meeting, nor will I be available very often by telephone or email. So in the next 2 weeks, if you have questions, issues, would be a good time to get hold of me. Or if not, if you don't, you'll probably have to wait until the 9th of May or beyond. So thanks for your patience and understanding.
Any liaison representatives? Crystal?
Yeah, I have two updates. First is for the Library Commission. On April 1, they had a community family-friendly event that took place between the public library and Centennial Hall. It was well attended. They had a high volume of people who showed up to participate in that event. And so at this last meeting, we kind of debriefed all the excitement that came from that. Just a note, there are more events that are coming down the line. So if you were interested, the one that is popping up on my calendar is happening on April 20th. They are having a library pub quiz. Again, this is all to kind of celebrate and uphold the fact that the public library is celebrating the 100-year anniversary. So if you want to find out more about these awesome events as they're happening, you can always drop in to visit them. You can follow Sitka Public Library, their Facebook page, or Friends of the Sitka Public Library. They have a page as well. But as far as this upcoming agenda, one of the things that they're going to look at is the ordinance that created the commission to see if there are revisions that would be appropriate. So that'll be their big discussion item on this next May agenda. And then My second one has to do with Parks and Rec. They just met today. And so this was actually a comment from a member of the public. They had mentioned that spring cleanup, which usually is happening around this time. Compactor is being installed, a lot surrounding that. So that was postponed to August. So that will happen. It's just going to happen a little bit later this summer. And then the big announcement is that Michael Colliver, he is the person that staffs Park and Rec, the commission. He is going to be transitioning to a new organization. So unfortunately, he'll no longer be the staff person for that one. His last day will be April 14th. And the reason that I mentioned that is we had a full table of commission members and all of them gave him a round of applause. So he will be missed. And those are my 2 updates.
Other liaison representatives? Sarah?
Alrighty, so the next 2 weeks, we're going to be super busy. Our next special meeting is on April 18th. That meeting is going to be held in the auditorium. There's numerous conferences that are going on here at Harrigan in the next couple of weeks. So April 18th, special meeting. Those are the annual evaluations for the municipal attorney and municipal administrator. That's at 6 p.m. April 20th. We will have a work session with the state assessor on Board of Equalization training. That's at 6 p.m. April 25th is our regular meeting. April 27th, we have a joint work session with the Assembly and Tourism Task Force. The task force appointments will be made at the April 25th meeting. We are accepting applications through next Wednesday at noon for the downtown business corridor seat, the tours and attractions seat, and then the 2 community at large seats. So if folks are interested, they can contact our office. And then our vacancy list. We have quite a few. Our Animal Hearing Board, Health Needs and Human Services Commission, the Investment Committee, Library Commission, Local Emergency Planning Committee, Parks and Rec, and Tree and Landscape Committee. So lots of volunteer opportunity for folks.
Any other reports this evening? Seeing none, it would bring us to adjournment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Assembly and staff, for your time, especially Melissa. It was kind of her agenda.